All right, so we've talked about before about showing enthusiasm. So it's like, yeah, let's get excited about whipping some kids. Get you excited, right? Or this lesson, it tells you got to be stern. So maybe I need to be stern and actually mentions being gruff. So maybe I should teach it that way. No, I don't want to come across as intimidating. I don't have that problem, do I? So we're going to finish up our lesson on discipline. Let me skip ahead to where we were at. And then we're going to get into talking about parents and babies and what we're looking like. So besides tonight, we've got 2 classes left. So what I would like to do next week, finish up whatever we've got left tonight, and then we're going to go ahead and move into and discuss both the Bible classes in the preschool child and the elementary child. And then that probably talk about the preteens and teens and kind of talk about all the kids kind of all together. And then that last week, what I would like to do is kind of discuss the adult class and then kind of some closing things. So that's just kind of looking ahead of where we're at. So one of the things that we were talking about as we kind of ended last week was one of the things to help keep order within a Bible class is to keep the kids busy, keep their mind busy. I should say that. Don't just keep them busy. Don't just give them busy work and keep them busy. Keep their mind busy. And so a lot of that boils down to how we teach, our style, and the information that we're passing along to them and how we're presenting that information. So don't be boring. And make sure, as we've talked about many times, that you've got enough material presented where you can just kind of flow through the class, and you've got extra material if needed so that you don't have any dead time. It's kind of like on the radio. So I haven't done a lot of radio, but the few times that I've been on the radio, it's like if there's somebody there with you, you can't have dead air, especially on live radio. So same thing in a Bible class. You can't have dead air, so you got to keep it moving. Again, as we talked about, make sure you've got more prepared than you think that you're going to need. Because again, you're trying to just keep the child's mind busy, and such a huge part of that is not losing kids, keeping eye contact, and this is a huge part of discipline, because all of us have had dads that, some moms too, that know how to give us the look. And so you can give a kid the look in a Bible class, and you can make that eye contact, and there's communication going on, and ain't a word being spoken. That's a huge part of discipline, but it's also a huge part of keeping the children and the students engaged, keeping that eye contact. So one of the things he talks about is keeping empty hands, and I kind of threw this in there because I'm not as familiar with dealing with kids with ADD and ADHD. I mean, as a school teacher, Beverly and some of these other teachers have more experience with dealing with this, and even if your own child has this, you can probably speak better as to how to handle that situation, and we'll talk about this just a little bit later. But one of the best things to do in that situation, if you know you've got a kid that has ADD or ADHD, work with the parents because they're going to know best how to handle each given situation, and so they can help guide you. But for the most part, kids don't need things in their hands, and so keep things out of their hands. Save pencils and crayons until they're necessary for an activity. Again, that's just something for them to piddle with and can draw their mind or pull their mind away from what actually it should be focused on. It really talks about for the younger kids, and this is for the younger girls, don't allow purses, because all of you that have had young girls, first time they get a purse, it's like everything goes in there. And if everything is in there, you have a chance of everything being pulled out during Bible class. So keep away from that. And with the little boys, they tell you can pay attention even to their pockets. You've got bulging pockets. Maybe they've got something in toys in their pockets. So make sure that you pay attention to that. And trust me, kids will get away with what they think they can get away with. Okay, so don't be naive. That's a huge part too about being a Bible class teacher. Don't be naive. These kids are great. We got great families, but these kids, they're kids. And so if they know that they can get away with something, they'll get away with something. So I mentioned that at the very end of last class, I don't allow phones in any of my classes downstairs. And All the parents know that ahead of time. All the kids know that ahead of time. And if you've never had a kid in my class, I'm telling all of you, no phone is going to be in my Bible class, because you don't have to have your phone to look at the Bible. You need your Bible. And I'm sorry, I'm not naive. There are kids that are down there that they'll be on Snapchat and they'll be on Instabook or whatever. They're not on Facebook because that's an old people's thing. But they'll be on whatever and make you think that they're looking at the Bible. So I'm not going to allow phones. And this is my opinion as well. They don't need electronic devices downstairs. Because if you allow electronic devices, even if it's an iPad or a Kindle or something like that, they're liable to be using that right up until time that Bible class is supposed to start. And it's going to be up to the teacher to tell them, hey, we need to put that away. And I know of situations, the bell rings, and they pull it right back out, and they're on it. We're here for Bible class. So this is a pet peeve of mine. I can't stand electronic devices. I can't stand them in worship services, because I've seen things even in worship services with adults that are acting like kids, and don't be naive. So I'm not telling you that's got to be your rule, but you're not going to come to my Bible class downstairs and have a phone. Actually, I have a basket sitting by the door, and when you walk in, it goes in that basket. Norm?
No, scratching head.
Oh, I thought he was getting scared. No, that is something that really does perturb me. These kids, we give them too much leeway when it comes to that, in my opinion. So if each child knows the rule, and if the rule is consistently enforced, children are usually willing to cooperate. So that's a big part of it, established up front. And again, I'm not telling you that you have to do this, but one of the last classes that I taught downstairs, before the class actually started, I met with the students and the parents, and I said, these are the expectations. So nobody's going to come into class and say, I didn't know what the expectations were. Parents know, students know. And so now when you come to class and you haven't met those expectations, now there's consequences. And you knew what the expectations were before you came to Bible class. But you have to make sure that the expectations are clear and that you are consistent in the way that you enforce it. If a kid forgets their Bible lesson one week and you do nothing about it, and then all of a sudden the next time you think, well, I think I need to do something about it now, you got to be consistent. And you got to be consistent with every child, with the way that you're going to handle certain situations and how you're going to enforce things. And again, if they know it up front and they know that you're consistent, then they're probably going to be less likely to try to pull the wool over your eyes. Playtime should not be a part of Bible class. It's not a reward. You know, if everybody behaves, then I'm going to give you the last 5 minutes and we're going to play. No, we're not rewarding kids for being good. We're there to learn, and you need to utilize every minute that you can toward teaching. Children do not need entertainment every moment of their lives. This goes back to, electronic devices don't need to be in the kids' hands when they come to worship and they come to Bible class. They don't have to have entertainment, something to do literally every minute of every day. Coloring in Bible class is usually a waste of valuable time. If the child is young enough to need a time filler, he may eat the crayons. I've never seen that downstairs. I'm sure it probably could happen. I've seen them eating other things that they shouldn't be eating, but not crayons. If the teacher needs a time filler, she has not done her preparation well enough. So again, don't use something to just fill time, to fill space. Make sure that there is a purpose and there is a plan, and it is guiding the kids, guiding the students toward what they should be learning. Make sure that you're cognizant of your time when a child feels like there's a story that they just have to get out. And look, this happens. Believe me, it happens. And the example that he used in the lesson book, I thought it's a good one. You got a kid that, maybe they're outside before coming to worship services and they end up seeing a snake and the dad kills the snake, and the kid can't get it off their mind. It's just like blown their mind. So it might be okay. Let the kid go ahead and tell it, maybe before class starts, get it over with, because if not, then their mind's going to be so focused on that, they're not going to be able to focus on Bible class. But the problem you got to be aware of is if that happens, and little Johnny is talking about that, and all of a sudden little Timmy, not our little Timmy, but little Timmy might be thinking, well, you know what? A couple weeks ago, my granddad had an issue, or this running with a snake, and then all of a sudden everybody's got to tell their snake stories. So you can't let that happen. But you have to recognize the way kids' minds work, and sometimes you got to let it out, get it out as quickly as you can, in going with Bible class. Be fair, be consistent, and yes, be strict. And I know that's a problem for especially a lot of you that are grandparents. It's a lot harder for a grandmama or a granddaddy to be strict. Sometimes I wonder, when my kids are with my mom and dad, I'm thinking, man, my kids are getting off so easy. And I know I didn't get off easy, but you do have to be strict. But the biggest thing is that you're consistent, and with this idea of being fair, again, you're treating everybody the same. I know all of us in school, we all knew who the teacher's pet was, and in Bible class, you can't have a pet, okay? Everybody's going to recognize if you've got a favorite, and so you've got to be fair and treat everybody the same. Gauge behavior fairly, demand a child's best, but not beyond his ability. A 3-year-old simply cannot sit as still as a 7-year-old, but it is misbehavior if a 5-year-old is acting like a 2-year-old. So again, you've got to recognize the difference, recognize what behavior should be expected at each age level, and make sure that that is what you demand in that Bible class. Be careful if you don't have children of your own, children of your own. This is something that obviously, the more experience you have, the better you're going to be able to handle any given situation. And so if you've got someone that has children and they've lived it, they have the experience, then that's someone that you should probably talk to if you've never had kids, because you don't really know what to expect. I know all of us, before we had kids, were probably thinking, you know what, when I'm a mom, when I'm a dad, this way I'm going to be. And then all of a sudden you get put in a situation and it's like, oh, okay. I wasn't really prepared for that. So don't walk into it thinking that you know it all when you've never actually had a kid of your own. And it talks about not comparing children. It's okay if it's your own kids and you want one of them to kind of improve. I'm just kidding. Don't compare kids because you can really tear somebody down when you do that. And if you've got somebody that you are treating almost like a pet and they're doing everything right, and someone that maybe not doing so well, and you tell little Susie, I sure wish you could be like little Johnny. No. All right? You've probably lost little Susie forever as a teacher if that's the way that you've treated her. And if you lose somebody like that, it may be hard for you to actually know, but they'll come sit in your Bible class and their mind is gone. So don't go comparing kids and trying to get one to act like the other. Erica?
That made me think of if you have a situation like that, and instead of pointing out someone else how good they are behaving and comparing that person, you can redirect their mindset and say, you know what, it would be a really good example if you could do this, and make it about how they can be a good example to the other students. And most of the time those kids are like, oh, okay. But that takes away from having to compare or say, look how these kids are doing it. You can just make it about them and how good they can be.
Yeah. Good point. And with this, you obviously have to be patient. There are some things that probably aren't that big of a deal, that maybe just be irritating to you, and you've got to kind of recognize what those situations are. But you can't, with your expectations, when they really should be here, and all of a sudden you've set the expectations here, where nobody can achieve it. So don't set the expectations so high that this the maturity level of the age group that you're teaching, they can never reach it. Because then you're going to be in a bad mood all the time, and the kids are going to be messed up the whole time. So make sure that you're not asking the impossible of a kid. And don't confuse patience with permissiveness. We can be patient while not allowing things that shouldn't be allowed. So make sure that you don't treat them the same. Be strict. Do not allow misbehavior under any circumstances. Again, if you allow it once, then they recognize, the kids learn that, okay, this is acceptable. So if this is acceptable, I can probably do even a little bit more. Don't allow it under any circumstances. No child, not even the problem child or the smart aleck teenage visitor, has the right to disrupt the class. Do not allow it. You cannot allow it. In any Bible class, you cannot allow misbehavior to happen. So, again, I know that it may not be something that is super easy. And I don't think this is super easy for anybody. Everybody's looking at me like, yeah, right. You probably love this. No. Being strict and being hard, especially on kids that we all love, but you can't let them misbehave. Don't forget that you're the teacher, and don't apologize for your sternness. Don't do something, and then at the end of the class, trying to I'm so sorry that I've got to be so stern. I'm sorry I was mean. No, you're the teacher. Like sometimes that's what you have to be, and so don't apologize for that. And we talked about not misunderstanding patience and permissiveness. Don't misunderstand love and permissiveness, because it ain't the same. All right? Love means you're actually going to discipline. Love doesn't mean that, well, you know what, I'm going to let it slide this time. I'm going to let them get away with it. No, not the same. Standing puts you in a position of authority. So I know a lot of our younger classes, of course, there are chairs set up. And for the younger kids, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And for some of the older classes, some of it may just be a personal preference. But obviously, if you're sitting down on the kids' level, there's a certain sense of sameness that comes along with that. And so if you are having an issue with a class either being disrespectful or maybe misbehaving, it is a simple thing to do. And if we need to get some more podiums, we'll do that. But you stand up. And just the fact that you're standing gives you an air of authority over those that are seated around you. So that is something that can be done. So he mentions a few things as far as discipline. And I just wanted us to kind of talk about this a little bit. So he says you do not have the right to spank a child in Bible class, but there are other forms of punishment. So I'll just tell you, if my kid's misbehaving, I wouldn't care if you spanked them. But I know most parents are not that way. And so it's probably not a good idea that you go whipping on a kid. Although I can tell you, wouldn't nothing else happen in your Bible class ever again if word got out that you was spanking them. But I realize that that's not a good thing to do in that situation. So he does mention that, well, maybe you could put a switch on the wall labeled teacher's helper. And I'm thinking, you just said we can't spank. You've told us to be consistent. And so the two don't really add up to me, because I'm not going to have a false threat. Like if I put a switch on the wall and a teacher's help, I'm going to use it, because that's what my granny would do when I had to go get a switch off the peach tree. So I don't think I would do that. I know that he mentions that in the book, but I'd probably stay away from that. So he talks about putting a kid in a corner. What are your thoughts on that?
It works real well.
Did you put a dunce hat on?
No.
No. I mean, we got a lot of parents in the class here. Erica?
I haven't put a kid in the corner. If the kid becomes that much of a problem where I feel like they need to be separated, I have just marched them right to the auditorium and said, here you go, and gave them to the parents. And I never, ever had a problem with getting out of that kid. I'm not saying the corner is a bad idea, but everybody knows me. I'm already space cadet. I don't want to have to monitor your bad kid in the corner while I'm trying to teach class. So, here's your kid.
Brent?
I agree with Erica on that, because if you march them upstairs, they're not going to be learning, but if you leave them sitting in the corner downstairs in the classroom, they're not going to be learning anyway, so remove the problem from your room. I don't kick kids out of my classroom at school and put them in the hallway because they're not going to be learning. If I have a problem that bad, they go straight to the principal's office.
Did you have something, Norman? You just... So, yeah. Miss Shirley? I'm scared with what you're about to say.
I have set a child next to me.
Yeah.
You know, when they were misbehaving, I would just move their chair over where I was. I have done that.
Yeah, and I've heard of different teachers do that. I've done it once or twice. And so this is a situation where it really helps with what we've talked about earlier in the class, where you know the students. And some of that comes from experience, but some of it may also come from communicating with the parents. Because again, the parents are going to know better how to handle and to discipline their child than what you will. And so communication is really key when it comes to this. But there are some classes, especially the younger classes, that it may be a benefit to put a kid in the corner. Now, we're not doing it because we're trying to embarrass them. And so if you're doing it just because you're trying to embarrass the kid, then you got the wrong motives. And if you end up embarrassing a kid, then things are not going to go well in the future. And so knowing the kids, sometimes it works just setting them right beside you, and now you can kind of oversee them more closely. But I would agree, if it gets too far out of hand, then the kid needs to come upstairs. Because if the kid is disrupting all of the Bible class, we would rather that kid be removed from the class so that everybody else can continue to learn, as opposed to allow the kid to continue to cause problems. And I think that we've got a good set of parents. If a kid is brought upstairs, that's a pretty serious offense, and so it's probably going to be dealt with, and hopefully it won't happen again. Unless the kid starts doing it and they think this is some kind of a reward, because they don't have to sit in your class. Don't be that teacher. Uh-oh. No more clicky. There we go. All right, so do not threaten punishment unless you intend to carry it out. Now, I don't care if you threaten it, as long as you're actually going to follow through with it. We can't be one of these teachers that the parents walk around Walmart and it's like 1, 2, 3, and then the kids, they're fine again, and then a minute later, 1, 2, 3. No, if you threaten it, then you better carry out the punishment. Say what you mean what you say, and I guarantee you the kids are going to have a whole lot more respect for you, and they will act right if you do that. Kids can sniff a bluffer from a mile away. They will figure you out so fast. And they know if you have nothing to back up what you say, and so then they're not going to be scared to do anything and to get away with anything. So make sure, again, don't be naive. So he talks about sarcasm, and in general, sarcasm is a problem for me. I haven't had a problem with this in Bible class. I'm just now getting my kids to the point where they're picking up on my sarcasm. This is not the way you should handle things in Bible class. So he actually mentions on page 117, he says, this is the bottom of the second column, sarcasm is not the way to correct a child. That only hurts. Strictness and harshness are not the same. Be consistent, be fair. Remember, it is easy to pick on the problem child. Sometimes we become so aggravated with a child who must be scolded frequently, we fail to notice when he does well one day. Yet this is the very child who needs positive feedback for good behavior the most. And so be strict. He talks about being a disciplinarian, but also being an encourager. When you've got a kid that you know has had some issues, when they do something that's good, then you encourage them. Pat them on the back, because positive reinforcement is also a good thing. Now, if that's the only thing you ever do is positive reinforcement, then there may be some problems. And so and one of the things that he mentions, this is over in the other column, but with this idea of being strict or being a disciplinarian, he says, be gruff, the big bad wolf, if necessary. All right? So you know what that means? See, that reminds me of my dad growing up. And used to, we didn't have to worry about this, but now we got all this on YouTube, and this video will live on forever. If my mom and dad ever watch this stuff, I love you, Mom and Dad, but I was scared to death of my dad. He was the big bad wolf. Now, I know that he loved me, but sometimes in Bible class, we have got to be the big bad wolf. We're not down there to be their friends. We're down there to teach them. And if the atmosphere is not conducive to teaching because somebody's misbehaving, then you've got to be gruff. You've got to be the big bad wolf. Never let one child correct another. All of you that have had multiple kids, you recognize this is a problem, okay? Everybody likes being the parent. You can't allow that, okay? You're the teacher. You're the authority figure. We're not going to let kids correct each other. And trust me, it will happen. Because you got kids, they recognize some other kid messed up, and they would love to just point that out to another kid. So make sure that you don't allow one child to correct another. So this is a list of one of the things, or something that I had found. It's not actually in this book, but a list of problems that a teacher can make that could cause discipline issues. So not being properly prepared, obviously we know that that's a huge one, making sure that we are prepared as possible. Not arriving on time, that can cause a huge disruption to the class, and also it's a horrible example that you're setting for the students. Now, obviously, if you get into an accident or something comes up and stuff happens, and we can't change that. But if it is a pattern, kids know that, and so you're really setting a bad example, and that could cause discipline issues within the class. Not taking a personal interest in each student, again, letting the kids know that you do care about them, and you care about their learning. Telling the students that they're bad or mean, that's, you can discipline, but you can't trash talk the kids, okay? Okay, you can't talk about them, especially in front of the other kids. Not being flexible, and we've talked about this, you're so set in your ways that this is the way that we're going to do it, and this is the way you're going to learn. That can cause discipline issues within the class, because the way that you think needs to go is not really helping the kids learn, and so they're getting frustrated, and that can cause problems. So you got to be flexible. By failing to show interest and excitement in the lesson, and we know if you don't do that, then you've lost the class pretty early on. So you've got to be enthusiastic. By failing to speak in a way that can be understood. And so if you're down there talking, and you're either talking too low, or you're talking too fast, or you're trying to use these big fancy words, the kids can't understand anything you're saying, and you can have discipline issues. If the classroom itself is crowded, cluttered, or dirty, we want our classrooms to be inviting, but if you've got so much stuff, especially if it's the beginning of a new quarter and the kids walk in, this is the first time they've been in, and their eyes are just like, there's just so much stuff to look at. You may actually not have them for half the class because they're just busy looking around the room. So this even goes against being crowded or cluttered, but if you've got so much, it can actually be a distraction. Seating arrangements, this is a big one. And we talked about setting the kid right beside you. You can figure out the ones that like to talk to each other, and you don't put them beside each other. And if you have to have a seating chart, kids hate that in school. But if you have to have a seating chart, then have a seating chart, because we don't want the seating arrangement to cause problems. Room temperature, I hate putting that one up there because it's so hard to control down there. It is very hard to control. All right, we have one thermostat, and it's controlling every radiator in every single room. So if you are having problems, let me know. We try to play with it and adjust it to where everybody is as comfortable as possible. And I do realize if it's like super hot in a room, it makes it a distraction. Likewise, if it's super cold in a room, it makes it a huge distraction. So it is something to think about. So if you are having problems, let me know, and we'll try to adjust it. Outside noise can obviously cause a problem, and obviously a student's home life. We don't know what's going on with students at home. They may be having discipline issues at home. They may be having issues with school. They may be having issues with a sports team, something, a girlfriend, a boyfriend. And so those issues can cause problems within the Bible class as well. Many problems can be prevented by the teacher being alert enough to recognize and anticipate trouble spots before they happen. And this goes along with knowing the kids. And you can kind of tell pretty early on kind of everybody's mood for that particular class. And so you probably have a pretty good idea if you've been paying attention, where your problems might arise. And that's where the stern look comes in, because you can kind of see the wheels already turning in a kid's mind. And so you give them a look, and it ends it. And so try to anticipate as many of those things as you can. All right, so he talks about the problem child, and he's got 4 different specific children that he would list as the problem child. And the first one is the unfaithful child. And this goes back to some of the stuff that we've talked about at the very beginning, and we'll talk about again in lesson 14. But with the unfaithful child, so much of that is going to be because of the parents. And obviously you can't combat that, but it is something that we have to be aware of. So are you teaching your child that other things are more important than Bible class and worshiping God? And he talks about this on page 118. I just wanted to read this because this is such a huge thing that we all need to pay attention to. And we all need to be mindful of, because it can very easily be who we become. And if we become this, then our children have the potential of being lost. So on the very bottom of the second paragraph, or the second column on page 118, it says, parents, how regular is your child's attendance at the worship service? If he cannot drive a car, then his soul's salvation is resting in your hands. Are you letting his soul be endangered while you have fun at the lake each weekend? Are you teaching him by example that secular education is much more important than worship to God? Is it a drudgery to your child to attend the service because most of the time he is allowed to stay home with daddy and have fun watching television while you're gone? His class has been designed so that each week's lesson is built on the lesson learned last week and prepares for next week. You have done your child a grave disservice if you have kept him out of class needlessly. And we live in a society, when I was growing up, which seems like a whole long time ago now, there was nothing going on Wednesday nights or on Sundays, sports activities or scouts or none of that stuff was on Wednesday nights and Sunday. It was unheard of. Now all of a sudden, everybody, Wednesday night is just like any other night of the week. And now we're losing Sundays too, to tournaments and all kinds of stuff. And so if you are allowing your children to miss Bible class or worship because they've got a game or because you're going to a concert or because you got scouts, then you're setting your child up for failure and you're being a horrible example to them. So it's just something for us to remember. Make your class as interesting as possible to make an impression on that child. So even if you've got a child who's got a bad home life and his parents aren't doing very well, you do the very best that you can. But recognize that child could still be a problem child. So the handicapped child, and we talked about this just a little bit ago, and hopefully you can see what I think is the most important thing. If you're having problems understanding what the most important thing is, if you've got a handicapped child, work closely with the child's parent. Plain and simple, okay? There is nobody that's going to know better how to handle their child than the parent. And so from the very beginning, make sure that you're working with the parent and knowing how to handle, whatever situation the child may be that's causing their handicap. The parent's going to know best. And also, the children need to be aware of this, not in the sense that you're trying to treat the child differently and make them feel differently or look differently or exclude them, but oftentimes kids are very perceptive as well, and kids can be very kind. And so they can help you in how you handle this particular student that may be handicapped. But again, all of that goes back to working with the parents because they're going to know what's best. So the undisciplined child, again, ultimately the parents are the problem. But remember, you can't change the class up or your level of discipline even for this child. Even when it is no more fun to teach the class than it is to face the firing squad. That's a rough Bible class right there. If you're about halfway through Bible class and you're thinking, boy, I'd rather be in front of a firing squad right now. And those times may come. And you just have to be prepared for that. But just because you've got a kid that comes in that they are undisciplined because of their parents, again, you still can't let them get away with things. And you need to, again, do everything that you can to have a positive influence on that child. And one of the things that he talks about is trying to help the child understand that positive attention actually feels good. And it's actually better than negative attention. And so you can work it that way. He says this child can be a thorn in the flesh of a teacher, but it is also the one most likely to give his heart totally and unequivocally to a teacher he thinks really cares. And this is huge for all of the kids. When they know that you actually care about them, that if you do have to discipline them, it's not because you are trying to be mean, but it is because you love them, and they can feel that and they know that, then you're going to have that child's attention. And so it's such a huge thing when they know that you really care. There's some saying about they don't really care what you know until they know that you care, something like that. I don't know who come up with that. That's pretty good. If they know that you care, then they're probably going to care a little bit more about what you know. So never give up on a problem child. He may be hearing more than he appears to be. The end is too important for you to give up while there is still hope. So this is just something that, again, we may be faced with. So he talks about the child who looks normal but is not. So we've talked about ADD and ADHD, but it could be dyslexia, it could be autism. And if you've got a kid that is dyslexic and you are trying to have them read, and they're stumbling, all you're doing is embarrassing the kid. So again, you've got to know what the situation is with each kid, and that comes with, again, working with the parents. But you've got to understand all of these things. And in certain situations, depending upon what the child's issue is, it may be best to have a team teacher, and that's perfectly fine. If we need to have that in one of our classes, let the teacher know that you think it would be best. That if you had someone working with them, and we can do that. Be careful how you treat these children. Certain things may be out of their control, and when they know you're not pleased, it can be crushing to them. And while we want to treat everybody the same, if a kid has a situation like this, then there may be some things that we do have to do differently to make sure that they stay engaged with the class. So as he ends, this is a few suggestions that he makes. So begin with the basic determination that no child will totally disrupt your class. Again, you're not going to let it happen. You're not going to let your class be disrupted by anybody. And your job is to make sure God's word is being taught to every child. So again, if you've got to pull a kid out because teaching or learning is not happening, that's what you've got to do. Be flexible in your own methods. Again, we talked about that. That can be frustrating to kids when you just keep pounding your way that is not really working. Set definite and distinct rules for behavior. Make sure, first and foremost, that they recognize we're going to show reverence for God in everything that we do. And so we're not going to blaspheme or make a mockery of God in any way, shape, or form. That's definitely not going to be allowed in our Bible classes. We listen to the lesson, and so everybody has to be engaged, and they have to be listening. We're not going to disturb our neighbors. We do not play or talk during class. We cooperate in the activities suggested by the teacher, and all extras such as toys, pencils, purses, phones, iPads, Kindles, etc., stay on the table unless class is over or they're not allowed in class at all. Ignore irritating actions that are not truly disruptive. And again, this kind of goes back to maybe it's a pet peeve and something that maybe is irritating to you, but it's not really that big of a deal. We have to be mature enough to not let it get to us. So he mentions that action from a problem child is not disruptive until it has gotten the attention of the other children in the classroom. So if something's going on and it's not disrupting anybody else, then it may not be a problem. So remember that. And if you need a team teacher, that's okay too. So remember, your goal is to teach the Bible story. Your task is to help each child reach heaven. Handle each situation before you in the wisest way possible. Do not give up when the task becomes hard, because the end result is too important. There are souls at stake. Many a good preacher or teacher of today was once a thorn in the flesh to some good teacher. And I guess since Jesse's not here, we can probably talk about he had to be the thorn in the flesh to somebody, right? We can talk to Mom. We can talk to Mama Flowers.
Donnie was right.
Oh, Donnie was? Donnie was the thorn in Ray's side. Yeah, we've probably all been that at some point. All right. If you cannot or will not become a good disciplinarian, then quit trying to teach. Again, he's pretty blunt. He's just going to tell you like it is. If you're not going to be able to teach and keep control of the class and be strict and be gruff and be the big bad wolf and be the disciplinarian when you have to be, then you don't have any business being down there. All right, we've got like 3 minutes, so let's, yes. Go ahead, Penny.
I worked with a child that had brain damage. He was shaken as a child, and he had to have a plate put in his head. And he couldn't function in the regular classroom. And so the teachers just didn't know how to handle him. And he was a pretty big kid for his age. And so I took him in a class by himself and tried to teach him, and realized that I wasn't getting through, but he knew my songs. So what I did, instead of telling the story, I made up a song about the story, and then I could go back and I would put up a picture to remind him of the story. And if he couldn't tell me the story, all I had to do was like sing the first 2 or 3 words that I had taught him, and he could tell me. We were studying Acts, and so there was a picture of Peter teaching the people, speaking, and I said, "When did the church begin?" And he would go, I go, "In Acts." He goes, "In Acts 2. And he goes, and I said, and he goes, "On the day of Pentecost." So he could answer the questions if because the music part of your brain was not damaged. And so it took a while to figure out how to work with him, but he could tell you all about acts when we finished our class. So parents didn't know how to work with him, the schools didn't know how to work with him, but we just kept trying different methods until we found something that worked for them.
Yeah.
And I actually meant to bring this up, and what Penny said just made me think of it. And that's a great example of how you can kind of change things up to figure out what a kid needs. So we made this rule a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3, I don't know, I lose track of time now. But a teacher should never be alone with a student. So you're not allowed to teach if you've only got one student. And I know that may sound harsh, and this came up a few years ago because of our insurance policy. And unfortunately, we live in 2023, and again, we want to think the best of everybody, but I can tell you real life examples of situations that are absolutely horrible. And if you have a visitor that comes in and you're the only teacher with their child and they walk out of here, they can accuse you of anything. And all of a sudden, it's that kid's word against yours. And so we do this for a very specific reason. And so there's nobody that should be teaching downstairs if you've only got one kid, unless you're the parent. So obviously, if you're the parent, you can teach the child. But that's just a reminder. I'm not sure that we actually have mentioned that lately, but you should, if you only have one student, either you've got to bring another teacher in or you've got to come upstairs, because you're not allowed to teach with just one student. All right, so this lesson was to me, is pretty important, and it's one that we don't talk about nearly enough. So this is going to push us a little bit more for time. I know this is going to be a lot to read, but so next week we're going to talk about parents and babies, and then we'll talk about so we'll do lesson 14, 15, and 16, and I'm going to hit the high points on all of them, 14, 15, and 16. Thanks, everybody.